Priestley here with you. And of course, we had the big split earlier this week. Maersk and MSC decided that they're going to forego their alliances. And also, we've got more interesting news to talk about in terms of Russia, the price cap, the vessel issues there as well. And we've got two people who can definitely talk with expert knowledge of this situation. Greg Miller joins us, our senior writer from Freightwaves, and also Dr. Sal Mercogliano, frequent contributor, associate professor of history at Campbell University. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us for today's roundtable. Maersk and MSC split up. Greg, this, I think people maybe saw this coming, but maybe not necessarily right now. Some people have said not necessarily a big deal. Some people say big deal. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, well, there were analysts like Lars Jensen that were talking about this last October. So, people did see coming. And if you look at the way MSC has behaved over the last couple of years, it has acquired 271 ships since August 2020. It has by far the biggest new build order book on order. So it looked like, from the outside looking in, that it was preparing to go on its own. And the two companies really have different strategies. So it's not something that was that much of a surprise, but it is a big deal, especially from the point of view of these two carriers, because in 2 years, they're going to have to completely reconfigure their major east-west trades, Asia, US, Asia, Europe. So for them, it's a lot of questions. It's going to be a big deal, and for their customers as well.
Sal, we had an interesting segment, a hot seat that we recorded on Tuesday, and you accurately predicted less than 24 hours later that you were going to see a split between these two, and lo and behold, 18 hours later, it happened. First off, thanks for being Nostradamus. Secondly, what's your take on the split?
I think the split is really indicative of issues that Greg talked about. I mean, Maersk is looking to become a transportation company from door to door. I mean, they want to be the e-commerce, the Amazon. MSC, on the other hand, wants to be the shipping company, and that's what you see them doing. They're buying ships like crazy. I think it's indicative that just before COVID hit, the Maersk S-Class, which at one time was one of the biggest ships out there, over 20 years old now, but they had scrapped one of those vessels, but now 5 of them have been sold to MSC. They're divesting themselves of that fleet. MSC is buying them. Maersk is getting rid of them. And you're definitely seeing a different strategy. I think Greg makes the other great point, too, is that how does this realign? Remember, this isn't taking effect till 2025. Mm-hmm. These are two companies that had 35% of the market share out there in moving containers. And the danger was they were going to get so big that there was an issue with cartels and alliances getting too big. They would get investigations. But now they got to start placing themselves. And now becomes the big moves behind the scenes. We just saw Maersk announce today they're consolidating all their sublines into Maersk. They're going to be making moves against Zim and who knows what other companies in the Alliance and Ocean Alliance. But there's going to be a lot of plays watching here about how this lays out over the next couple of years. This is going to be a long process to see where it finally resolves.
Yeah, so how does that landscape change here, Greg? You wrote another article after that first initial announcement was made. Does this really change the landscape in terms of maritime shipping? And also, we had Lauren Beegan on yesterday to talk about this, and she said this wasn't necessarily a huge thing, but over the fact that alliances could be rearranged in some way, shape, or form. How does this change the landscape?
Yeah, I mean, for MSC, the general consensus is that, when their new builds are delivered, they are going to be big enough to maintain their network.
Yeah.
For Maersk, there's another question there. It's unlikely that that's the case. They don't have a big order book. Most of the ships they have on order are either to replace older vessels or to switch to methanol fuel. So they're going to have a lot of work to do. And one idea is that they don't really need to be in another alliance. They can simply focus on the lanes that they do best, and then do vessel sharing agreements with other carriers in other regions to fill that out, and they can do slot chartering in other areas to fill that out. It's very difficult. There could be this reshuffling, but it's really complicated when you think about how that's going to work. The other alliances, the 2M alliance was between two relatively equal partnered carriers, Maersk and MSC. There's no one else that's that close to the size of Maersk. So it's hard to figure out how that would work. The next largest would be CMA CGM, France, and Maersk and CMA CGM have worked in the past before, so that's a possibility. But CMA CGM is in the Ocean Alliance, so that would cause problems there. And then the next largest behind CMA CGM is COSCO, and that just sort of seems unlikely. If Maersk is not a good fit with MSC, then why would it be a good fit with Costco?
Right.
So there's a lot of questions on how that's going to work. But, the big thing that, probably listeners here want to talk about is, how is that going to affect shippers?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get to that
there.
in just a second. Sal, let me switch gears just a little bit in terms of talking about Russia. This was supposed to be a big deal, the price cap, the vessel, the insurance, all of those issues. Given what has happened since early January and obviously also early December, what's your take on what's going on right now with Russian oil and how it's being shipped and how the world is reacting to it as well?
Well, I mean, the next big kind of shoe to drop here is going to be February 5th with the EU sanction against the import of Russian diesel. And what we're seeing right now is Europe is gobbling up diesel on the world market in a way we hadn't seen before. They're pulling it from the U.S., they're pulling it from the Mideast, they're pulling it from a lot of countries around the world, which is going to have an impact. We're going to see reductions in diesel supply in the northeast part of the United States as it's pulled out to move over there. We're going to see escalation in price probably. At that time, this is going to be a big reshuffling. And we just saw the EU putting a $100 price cap on the diesel, on Russian oil. What we're seeing, obviously, and we've seen it reported over and over again, is Russian oil is going to countries other than the EU, other than sanctions. It's being refined and being shipped back. So we're in this big kind of circular movement where oil is being moved a longer distance, the ton miles are increasing, but we're not seeing a reduction. But come February 5th, we're going to see another change here because this diesel is going to have a big impact. Fortunately, we've had a warm winter. I don't know if it's global warming or what, but it's been a mitigation against a lot of things that we potentially saw. We've seen LNG prices come down in terms of charters. And we haven't quite seen the spike yet in tankers. Greg's great piece talking about the start of 2023. We haven't seen a lot of what we expected to see yet. But again, you get a cold February and all of a sudden demand goes up and we see China reopening. That can have an impact, obviously, on the cost of fuels and charters across the world. Yeah, Greg, what are you seeing with regards to the Russian issue, if you will, in terms of how they're promoting their oil? And again, it's basically going through one extra step to try and get their oil refined and then out to the market.
Well, I mean, the December 5th deadline for the crude oil, that's been working fine. The Russian crude is actually continuing to flow. What was going to the EU before is mainly going to India now. So the world is not short of oil and the price of oil has not increased. At the same time, Russia is being forced to take a discount on its oil. Russian Urals is right now around 46. They had budgeted for 70. It's a 43% discount to Brent. So they are having to take a discount on their crude, but it is flowing on tankers to places like India, to places like China. So it's working. The problem, and there are enough tankers. The problem with February 5th, the cap is going to be set at 100, which is fairly high. So theoretically, that diesel should find buyers. The Russian diesel should find buyers in places like South America. There's a bigger question as to whether there's going to be enough tankers to continue to allow Russian diesel to flow, unlike on the crude case. Mm-hmm. And if that's the situation, then Russia would refine less and send more crude out, send less diesel out, and then there'd be more competition in the world market for diesel. And since diesel is a global market, that's going to increase the price of diesel for consumers in the United States. So to be determined, but that's the different situation.
Going back to what the shippers are saying, I want to throw up a chart here. This is the inbound ocean tenders that basically all ships headed towards the United States. There you see kind of about 2/3 of the way back the famous falling off of a cliff that we had, and then the eventual roll, if you will, out towards today where we basically had a continuous decline. Sal, right now, obviously with the economy the way it is, how do you see the fare of ocean shipping right now, especially with regard to rates?
Well, I mean, I think we've seen the rates stabilize, come back up a little bit. So we've kind of plateaued out to where we are, again, you come off that cliff and you're eventually going to hit bottom. And that's what we saw happen. You have the issue here. Again, I think one of the big issues that's happening below the radar that we're not talking about near enough is the new requirements on fuel that are forcing ships to slow down and monitor their fuel, start taking their report cards on what they're doing, which is going to require a little bit more capacity out there than what you've seen in the past. And I think the new order book for containers demonstrates a resizing of the fleet. You're going to get rid of a lot of smaller vessels. You're going to consolidate into larger vessels. Just looked at the Port of Savannah, for example, over the past 5 years, and the number of port calls into the Port of Savannah are down, but the size of the cargo coming into Savannah has increased tremendously. And I think that's what we're starting to see, this efficiency going in. It raises the question about MSC buying so many vessels, whether MSC is doing the right strategy and MSC is waiting, and versus Maersk waiting it out to right size their fleet.
Let me catch you up there, and just because we've only got about a minute left. Greg, your impressions of obviously that chart and where you see the world in terms of the shipper in looking at their rates that they're going to have to pay.
Yeah, well, obviously, the next big, shoe to drop will be the contract rates, which are going to be renegotiated in the spring. So, the carriers are still making tons and tons of money because a lot of these contracts have been renegotiated, mid-contract, but a lot of them haven't. And so there's going to be a big step down, come the spring. And that's where the carriers are still going to make a lot of money in the fourth quarter and the first quarter and even the second quarter. It's really later in the year when the shippers are going to get a lot of relief. And going quickly to Maersk, to MSC, the comment about them, buying a lot of ships. The good thing there is they can just they can sell them for scrap, whereas people that chartered in ships are stuck in contracts. So, they probably bought them with cash, and if they don't need them, they'll sell them.
All right. Well, gentlemen, we're going to have to hold it there, but it's going to be interesting to see how things work out, like you say, over the course of the next few months as these new shoes drop, if you will. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.